Adobe Firefly is the all-in-one creative studio with AI-powered image and video editing for today's creative process. Built for creators of every kind, Firefly helps you generate, edit, and experiment fast. Because the asks aren't getting smaller, the budgets aren't getting bigger, and the timelines, oh yeah, still tight. With all the best creative AI models in one place, Firefly brings your ideas to life. Unlock a better way to make with Adobe Firefly.
Hey, this is JJ Virgin. Welcome and thanks so much for joining me. This is Ask the Health Expert. Here I put the power of health in your hands and give you access to the top people in health and wellness. In each episode, I share safe ways to get healthy, lose weight, heal your gut, detox, and lots more. So if you want to get healthy and get off the dieting for life merry-go-round, I'll give you strategies that will help you look and feel better fast. All right, we are going to be talking bone health today. And guess what? Bonus, as we talk about bone health, and first of all, we're going to talk about bone health and why you want to be thinking about this right now, probably 10 years ago. And you'll also want to be looking at this if you've got kids 20, 30, etc. So we're going to be talking a lot about that. I have the perfect guest for me unpacking all of this. The bonus, of course, is everything you do for your bones. It's amazing what else it helps, which is pretty much everything. I've got Kevin Ellis, the bone coach, with me today. He is a certified integrative nutrition health coach, podcaster, YouTuber, bone health advocate, and founder of thebonecoach.com. And he'll tell you why a guy, got into this. It's a pretty amazing story. He has created a 3-step process, a unique process, and a world-class coaching program to help women with osteopenia and osteoporosis in over 1,500 cities around the world. And he is on a mission to help 1 million plus people around the globe build stronger bones and to help our children and grandchildren prevent osteoporosis and other diseases. And I'll tell you, having a cousin who ignored all this, who basically this has completely changed her life, having such bad osteoporosis. This is one that I've been really focused on with people. We're going to talk more about that and why and some of the stories that we've seen. And the information you're going to get in this podcast is enormously helpful and immediately helpful. However, we also have an incredible masterclass and some fun recipes that Kevin's created too. So you can grab that for free at jjvirgin.com/bone coach. And I will be right back with the bone coach, Kevin Ellis. Kevin, welcome to the show. So glad to have you here.
JJ, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's crazy. I don't think we've actually talked about this, which is insane because, I know bone health's not really sexy. It's not probably one of those most sexy things to talk about. And it is so devastating if it happens to you. And I've already had friends who have broken their hips and had hip replacements. So this is a really important issue. And I think it's as we're living longer, you want to make sure you're living longer better. So
absolutely.
The weird thing, though, is how you, a young dude, have become the bone coach and so interested in osteoporosis and osteopenia. Why was that?
Yeah. And for me, my personal health journey really started before I was even told I had osteoporosis. It actually started when I was a lot younger. When my mother was 5 months pregnant with me, my father was told he had cancer. And 2 months after I was born, he passed away. And he was 35 years old at that time. And I always, as I was growing up, I always had in the back of the head that was my expiration date. And, that was kind of the finish line for me, was passing away at an early age. And I ended up developing, autoimmune disease, celiac disease, malabsorption of nutrients for many, many years, high stress, poor sleep, low energy, all these other things contributing. And I actually had elevated alkaline phosphatase levels and elevated liver enzymes. And one of the physician's assistants said, hey, let's run a bone density scan too. And
how old were you at the time?
30.
They never think of doing this for men.
Never.
And I will tell you, I found this in one of my male clients 20 years ago because I discovered celiac, and then I was like, you better go get a bone density test. And I think this is so key important. We're talking mainly to women, but it's not just a female disease. So.
Absolutely. And I recommend that, especially even the most of the women that we work with now, they're women 40 to 65 plus that have osteopenia or osteoporosis, but a lot of them, they saw the progression that happened with their mothers or their grandmothers and things like that. Or maybe now they have daughters that are younger, that are in their 30s and 40s, and they're worried about their progression as they get older. I always say, get the objective information as early as you possibly can. If you can get a baseline in your 30s or 40s, that's going to set you up so that you don't have this big shock or surprise right around menopause or after menopause.
Yeah, I started doing DEXA scans in my, I think late 20s, early 30s, and I just don't understand why this isn't a standard of care thing.
I know.
So, all right, so here you are, a young guy who's getting checked for osteoporosis.
Yeah.
Then what happens?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with osteoporosis, and I realized at that point in time, the options that were presented to me were, you're going to have to be on a medication at some point in your life, and fracture is going to be your future. There really wasn't any other dancing around that.
Wow.
There was some directness that was there, and it was really unsettling for me being, my background, even before I got into the health field, was in the Marine Corps. I was in the infantry, always considered myself a really tough individual that can endure a lot of things. And when you get told you have brittle bones or osteoporosis, that just stripped all of that away from me.
Yeah.
I felt like a part of my identity was taken from me at that point in time.
And then what did they put you on, Fosamax?
No. So I actually did not go the bone drug route.
Those bone drugs are frightening.
Yeah, there are a lot of side effects, a lot of things that there are short and long-term implications to use of those drugs. And I wasn't ready to go that route. I knew there was a lot of issues with digestive health, nutrition, stress, sleep, exercise. We're figuring out root cause issues and addressing them that had to be done before I would even consider something like that as an option. So
that's such an important thing too, because here you were, what'd you say, you were 30?
Yep, 30.
A male at 30. The very first question is, what the heck's going on? A 30-year-old male who's very physically active doesn't have osteoporosis or osteopenia. So
that's right. So celiac disease for me, celiac disease was the primary contributing factor there. So obviously you need bone healthy nutrients every single day. Your body needs those calcium, magnesium, things like that to execute its daily functions, muscle contractions, nerve impulses, all these different things, super important. If you're not taking that in, and also if you can't absorb it because your absorption centers are damaged from celiac disease, you're going to have a really hard time, and your body's going to look for those nutrients somewhere else. And they're going to go to the largest reserve you have of minerals, which is your bones. And it's going to pull it and rake it from the bones. So that's what was happening to me. And I had no idea.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, and so did you know you had celiac, or when did you find out you had celiac?
I found that out, but I didn't know. I found it out a couple years prior, but I didn't know to get a bone density scan. I didn't even know that was going to be an issue. Again, for me, I was thinking that wasn't even in my realm of thinking, because I always thought, that's not something that young males get, especially ones that have a background in weightlifting and all that. So I was really shocked at that point in time.
Yeah. So before we go any further, I think probably it's important for people to understand what osteoporosis and osteopenia really are. And then I'd love to dig into, because I'm sure that this is new information for people listening, that celiac could be one of the causes. When you just think about it, it makes total sense. But before we get into that, just give people a definition of it, because I think most people only think of someone breaking their hip when they're 70.
Yeah, of course. So osteoporosis literally means porous bone. And it's a condition that's characterized by either not enough bone formation, excessive bone loss, or it's a combination of the two. And what happens in osteoporosis is both your bone density and your bone quality are reduced, and that's going to increase your risk of fracture. And the way you find out you have osteoporosis is through a DEXA scan. That's dual energy X-ray absorptiometry. It's a painless test, kind of like an X-ray, but very low levels of radiation. You lay down on this machine, the machine does a scan, and it tells you your bone mineral density, so the actual mineral content of your bone. And then it generates this score. And the score is called the T-score. And the T-score is telling you how much your bone mass differs from the bone mass of an average healthy 30-year-old adult. So if you got a score of +1 or -1 or 0, that's considered normal and healthy. If it's -1 to -2.5, that's oftentimes considered osteopenia or low bone mass. And if it's lower than -2.5, so -2.6, -2.7, so on and so forth, that's considered osteoporosis. And the lower that negative number becomes, the more severe the osteoporosis is. And most women are getting these scans done when they're in their 50s or 60s as a check in the box. Their doctors are going to order them, but that's too late. So if you haven't had one yet and you're listening to this, go get a DEXA scan. And also, you don't want to avoid getting one just because you don't want to know what the outcome of that test result might be, right? That wouldn't be a good approach there either.
Yeah. So I was just thinking about it because, I've actually been doing them over the years, but I just realized I have not heard from one doctor, even my functional medicine doctors, to go get this done. None of them. That's kind of wild. So I think the important underlying point there is it's just not something people think about. And it's definitely one you want to check early.
You want to check it because, we've got approximately 10 million Americans have osteoporosis. Another 44 million have low bone density. That number is going to increase over time. There's no doubt about that. We've got one in 2 women and up to 1 in 4 men will break a bone in their lifetime due to osteoporosis. For women, you've got the incidences. It's greater than that of heart attack, stroke, and breast cancer combined.
Wow.
6
so
months
what causes it?
So there are different types of osteoporosis. So we've got primary osteoporosis, which is typically related to the decrease in estrogen in postmenopausal women. Estrogen has that protective effect on bone. When estrogen levels decrease, as they do during menopause, that causes an increase in the activity level of cells that break down bone. Okay, but then we have a whole nother cause of osteoporosis, and that's secondary osteoporosis. And that's a category I fell into, and that's where osteoporosis occurs as a result of behaviors, conditions, diseases, disorders, and medications. Most people that are diagnosed, we can't just make the assumption that it's just hormones and that's the only cause, which is oftentimes what's going to happen when you're at the point of diagnosis is we're going to chalk it up to hormones and say, it's just a natural part of your life. But we need to, as our own educated and informed patient and advocate, we need to be the ones saying, I think we should do a little more testing. Let's figure out if there's anything else contributing so that 1 or 2 years doesn't pass by and you've had more bone loss. So there are many different causes and contributors, but those are the 2 major buckets that they fall into.
Yeah, I know. I have a cousin, there are no prophets in your hometown. She's like, I could never, gee, maybe you should get a checkup. Apparently had never gone to a doctor, from the time she was 18 on. And by the time they discovered this severe hypothyroidism, her bones were so brittle that, this is just something, again, go to your doctor and start this one early. And if you're now in your 50s and you've got kids, start it early for them too.
And I think what's important too, JJ, is so if we go and we get a bone density scan, right, and we're looking at that single test result, what that test does not tell you is it doesn't tell you if you're still actively losing bone right now. So if you imagine your body's like a bucket, the water within your bucket represents your bone mineral density. Over time, over years and years, that water level gets lower and lower and lower. And what you need to do is when you go get diagnosed, you need to figure out, are there still holes in your bucket right now? Are you still losing bone density? Because a lot of times what's going to be proposed is take some calcium, take some vitamin D, do some walking, and here's your bone drug. But that's not enough. So in order to figure out if you're still actively losing bone right now, if there's still a hole in your bucket, there's a test called the serum CTX test, CT-low peptide test. And what this test does is it looks at the activity level of cells that are breaking down bone. And if that activity level is elevated, that can be an indicator of active bone loss and root cause issues that need to be addressed. So that's an easy test. And if you go to your general practitioner, they may or may not be familiar with it. If you go to an endocrinologist or functional medicine practitioner, they're probably going to be familiar with that test. But that's a really important one to ask for.
All right. So someone coming in, because I know what I've always heard is the standard of care. Quite often you hear it's to take one of these drugs that have so many side effects. Has that changed, or is that still the way it is?
That's still what happens with a lot of people. I would say, 85% of the people I speak with, that's the general recommendation: calcium, vitamin D, walking, take a bone medication. And there are different types of medications that are proposed. And, it reminds me almost of this old economic adage: there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? You can take the medication, but it's not going to come without short and long-term implications of use, side effects, and things like that. So most people are familiar with the class or the category of drugs called anti-resorptives, and Fosamax is a bisphosphonate, which falls into that category. And what those drugs are designed to do is slow down the activity level of cells that break down bone. But as we're all going about our daily lives and doing activities, exercising and things like that, a normal part of bone remodeling is you're going to get these tiny little micro cracks and fractures, and your bones or cells within your bones are communicating and saying, okay, we need to repair these little micro cracks and fractures. So we have the osteoclasts that come in and scoop out the damaged, worn bone. And then you've got osteoblasts that come in and build stronger, new, healthier bone. That's a natural process that happens every day for everybody. But when you take a medication that slows down the activity level of cells that scoop out that damaged bone, what happens over time is you can start to accumulate those tiny little micro cracks and fractures. And that's why taking some of these drugs longer term, especially the bisphosphonates, the safety and efficacy is not really known beyond 5 years of use. So really important to understand some of these things up front before you start going that route.
So what can you do instead of going that route?
Well, so the first thing is get objective data, get objective information. You got to start doing some testing. The first one, I think, understanding if you're actively losing bone, that's a really important one to do up front. Then if you do have active bone loss, start exploring the root cause issues. Some of the really important ones that we need to look at up front: obviously, you want to get your vitamin D tested. That's 25-hydroxy vitamin D. You want to get your PTH. That's parathyroid hormone. That'll be super important. Comprehensive metabolic panel to look at your calcium levels and some of the other important markers there. And then celiac disease is another important marker we need to look at. And you can do a TTG IgA test, tissue transglutaminase test. And what that test does is it looks at antibodies. And if you have an elevated level of those, that can be an indicator that you potentially have celiac disease. And what they'll do is, if those antibodies are present, they're then going to try to confirm with an upper endoscopy. And what that does, they put you under, they do a sampling of your small intestine. They see if your little nutrient absorption centers are blunted and damaged. And if they are, then they're going to confirm a celiac diagnosis there.
Now, could just gluten intolerance, but not outright celiac, do it too, or does it have to just be outright celiac?
If you have issues, like if there's an underlying issue of anything contributing to inflammation, is not going to be helpful for your bones. That's actually going to pour fire on the activity level of cells that break down bones. So even if you do not have celiac disease and you don't have that intestinal damage, it would still probably be a good idea in many cases to be gluten-free, right? To follow that route, to make sure you don't have at least something else contributing to underlying inflammation.
Makes total sense. All right, so you're checking first to see if how much you're breaking down and what that rate is, checking for celiac or gluten intolerance. And then, with that information, what else is there anything else you should look at before you make up a plan?
Yeah, so the next thing you really want to look at is gut health too. We need to focus on making sure that you're I always say that you should imagine I know I said I used the metaphor of a bucket a second ago, but if you imagine that your body and your bones are like plants, in order to grow, they need the right nutrients and the right conditions, right? But so many people focus so much on the salads, the smoothies, the supplements that they're not considering the soil. And your gut is like the soil. We're absorbing almost everything there. So when you are chewing food and breaking it down and it's making its way to the small intestine, that's your soil. But you need roots in your soil to absorb anything. Those are your villi, those tiny little hair-like projections. So a lot of times, even if people are eating healthy, they might not be properly breaking down their food, and that food might not actually be absorbed by the villi, and you could have a situation where the villi are potentially damaged. So what are some contributors to that? Low stomach acid can be an issue for a lot of people. And a lot of times when somebody has low stomach acid, they take PPIs, proton pump inhibitors for that. And I took those for a number of years. Tums are proton pump inhibitors. And
was that prior to you getting diagnosed?
Yeah, prior to me getting diagnosed. Yep, prior to me getting diagnosed.
Interesting.
And like reflux is one of the reasons why people take proton pump inhibitors. But a lot of times when somebody has reflux, they actually have low stomach acid. It's not that they have too much stomach acid. And the reason it's a problem to suppress what little stomach acid you have is you need stomach acid to properly break down and extract nutrients from your food. Amino acids, like they're the building blocks of protein. Your bones are 50% protein by volume, so they need amino acids. Calcium is the primary mineral constituent of your bones. Low stomach acid is going to reduce its absorption. Same thing with magnesium, iron, B12. If you have low stomach acid, your soil is going to be starved of those nutrients. So that's a really important one. And then you need to be looking at, do you have the wrong balance of bugs in your soil? So dysbiosis, the presence of bad bugs, maybe like gut infections, or even good bugs in the wrong place, SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. That if you've got issues there too, we have to address those things because that's going to prevent your body from absorbing nutrients, and it could be a source of leaky gut and systemic inflammation, which are not going to be good for your body or your bones.
With all of this, then, how would you then take someone who sees that they've got, they're probably under stress, which we haven't even talked about stress and what it can do. Maybe we should hit stress real quick too, because that can really impact this. So how does stress play into this?
Yeah, stress plays a major role in bone health. So, if it's pretty well documented that if you have high levels of stress, that's going to be something that's contributing to bone loss. And especially if it becomes chronic, it's something that has to be addressed. Not only that, it's going to affect all your other body systems too. And sleep is another important factor too. That's pretty well documented also. If you're not sleeping well, poor sleep is going to reduce your bone quality. So those are two really big ones that we need to address. And you need to have more than just a plan of maybe a few deep sighs in and exhales out once or twice every day. That's not going to cut it. We need to incorporate some other important practices. Maybe meditation is important. Even if you just take maybe a couple minutes every day to have some conscious breathing where you're really focusing on that can be helpful too. But developing a plan around that is going to be important.
Yeah, it's very cool about all this. I think the big key takeaway is that it's something that tends to be forgotten until a point where it's too late. So many of the things that help your bones help everything else too. So that's the good news. But I want to get people away from thinking, this is something you have to worry about, when you after menopause. No, this is that's not when you start to look at this. You address it way earlier. So, all right, someone, because everything you're going to say is whether someone's got active osteoporosis or wants to avoid it, I'm sure, but someone's got osteoporosis. What's the diet they should be on? What should they eat?
I will start by saying there's not a perfect diet for every single person. That's what everybody asks me, what's the perfect diet for osteoporosis? Right. They hate my response because they hate when I tell them, we're all biochemically and genetically unique individuals. And we're going to respond to different foods and supplements and dietary approaches differently. With that being said, in general, Obviously, anti-inflammatory diet is going to be super important. I would say there are some foods that work, generally speaking, for most people, right? And I don't like saying every single food is good for every single person, but if you're incorporating fish, salmon, mackerel, sardines, fish with bones in, those are great. They'd be canned. Vital Choice is a great company that has, canned fish that you can use. And the bones in these fish, they're not actually hard bones that are going to poke you in the mouth. They almost kind of melt in your mouth. And what these bones have is they have all the minerals that you need to support your own stronger, healthier bones. So if you're looking for a great source of calcium that's non-dairy, that's going to be a great choice. Okay. And you've also got the benefit of protein that's going to come there. Obviously, we need protein and amino acids to rebuild our bones. And then omega-3s. Omega-3s are the dampeners of inflammation. Inflammation contributes to bone loss. So if you can incorporate those even a couple times a week, that's going to be a fantastic addition. Coconut oil, that's a great addition too, or can be a great addition. It's considered one of the healthiest foods on the planet. Over 1,500 studies showing its benefits. And for bones specifically, it can be helpful not just in the protection against bone loss, but also in the actual improvement of bone structure. Okay. And then we've also got coconut oil has this type of fatty acids called medium chain triglycerides. We'll call them MCTs. And MCTs, they're metabolized differently than other fats. They go straight to the liver where they're converted instantly into energy and ketones. And ketones obviously are an efficient, clean burning fuel source for the body. So, and the last part that I really like about coconut oil is we were talking earlier about digestive issues and how that can cause problems for people absorbing their nutrients. Well, coconut oil actually has antimicrobial and antifungal effects. And close to 50% of the fatty acids in coconut oil are lauric acid. And when the body digests lauric acid, it forms a substance called monolaurin. And both lauric acid and monolaurin help fight bad bugs, pathogens, and even the same bacteria that cause staph infection, C. diff, and the same candida yeast that causes oral thrush. So coconut oil is an amazing, amazing addition if you can get that into your plan. Another one that I really like is arugula. Arugula is a leafy green, same cruciferous family of vegetables as broccoli and kale, rich in potassium, folate, vitamin C, vitamin K, and bioavailable calcium. Okay, so if you look at a clamshell of arugula at the store, 85 grams, about 3 ounces, that has about 200 milligrams of calcium. And unlike spinach, a lot of people eat a lot of spinach, and I don't ever like saying completely avoid foods because some people can tolerate them and handle them. But spinach has, it's a common green a lot of people use, but it has a lot of oxalates in them. And oxalates are considered an anti-nutrient that can bind up bone healthy minerals like calcium and prevent their absorption. So if you've got kidney stones, digestive issues, arthritis, joint pain, those may be some indicators that you have a hard time breaking down and degrading oxalate. So you can actually make that swap if you've got a lot of spinach for some arugula too.
And how important is, having more of an acid alkaline balanced diet?
I would say definitely incorporating more leafy greens and fruits and vegetables and things like that. That's a really important part of this plan, right?
Yeah, it's funny. I've read there's whole books written on this. I'm like, it's pretty simple. Don't you just eat more plants with your your protein?
Yes, but here's what happens a lot is because protein, acid forming. This is a lot of people try to shy away from that because they want to stay in this alkaline state, but you need protein. So we don't want to sacrifice our protein intake and just eat vegetables. That's not going to be the best thing to support your bones long-term. So coming up with a balance is going to be really important, and hitting those protein targets and calcium targets too is going to be important also.
What about supplements?
Supplements, I always try to get people first to start by getting as much of their nutrients from food if possible. But if you're going to be supplementing, we want to make sure we're getting enough vitamin D, enough vitamin K2, vitamin C. If you're not getting enough from your food, that can be an important one to supplement. Calcium, magnesium, B vitamins, omega-3s, probiotics. And I actually really like, especially from a protein perspective, essential amino acids. Essential amino acids are, easily digested form to make sure you're meeting your daily protein total. So those are all great additions. I would say a lot of people aren't too familiar with vitamin K2. And what vitamin K2 does is it aids in bone mineralization and formation by activating something called osteocalcin. And you can actually look at these levels in your blood of osteocalcin. But what K2 does is it is ensuring your calcium is deposited in our bone and not our soft tissues like our arteries and our kidneys. So where are you going to find K1 and K2? So K2, you're going to find that in things like beef liver or grass-fed ghee or butter or dark meat chicken or pastured egg yolks. That's where you'll find a version called MK4. And then K2, MK7, you're going to find in hard cheeses, fermented foods, sauerkraut, kimchi, natto, and bacterial fermentation in our guts, which is pretty interesting. Your gut, microbes in your gut can actually produce nutrients and beneficial compounds for your body to support better health. That's pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about things that you should, we've been talking about the things that are great for your bones food-wise. Are there some things that are just got to stay away from? I remember reading about, gymnasts having a lot of issues that were drinking a lot of diet sodas and all the acidic, something from the cans leaching of the phosphorus or something. So what about
phosphoric acid? So if anybody's consuming soda, that's a no-no, right? Just scrap that one out of your diet today. Swap those out for some mineral waters or something like that. And then you can actually get some minerals and nutrients, some beneficial things for your body instead of taking away and depleting. Sugar. If you didn't already know, if you're listening to JJ,
another nail in the coffin.
I was just going to say, let me take this nail right to the coffin too. So sugar, reduce your sugar intake for bone health too, because sugar damages bone by triggering an inflammatory response. And it's going to deplete your bone healthy minerals, calcium, magnesium, chromium, copper. It's going to inhibit intestinal absorption of calcium. And it's going to block the absorption of vitamin C. Vitamin C is key for maintaining a healthy skeleton. And, sugar obviously comes in a lot of different forms. It's not just, the white sugar in the package. It's your breads, your chips, your cookies, cupcakes, crackers, pastas, pizzas, all that stuff. So that's another reason why we want to avoid sugar. Chemicals, I would say glyphosate. Again, I'm sure organic, if you can get it and it makes sense for your budget, go for organic foods. That's super important because glyphosate is obviously associated with cancer. It's a chelator of minerals, and it's not going to be a good thing to be ingesting and putting in your body. So the Environmental Working Group has a list of the Dirty Dozen, the Clean 15. You can use that as a guide to figure out what are the best foods to maybe go organic on.
Perfect. And finally, we have to talk exercise.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
So exercise is a super, super important part of your bone health. And a lot of times, like I was talking about earlier, the doctor is usually just going to say, hey, go do some walking and you're going to be fine. But that's not going to be enough. And I think a lot of us know that. Exercise plays a super important part in bone health. So we need two different types of stimuli for our bones. You need muscle pulling on bone, and you need impact. And the most effective interventions are going to use one or both in combination. So when muscle pulls on bone, it's going to make them stronger. You've got this mechanical signal that's sending a chemical signal to induce that structural adaptation. So we've got that going for us. And then impact exercises are another addition that we have to have. In terms of intensity of exercise, the studies that show the greatest effect are when we're doing in the 5 to 10 rep range about. So that's going to be important. And then when we're talking about the different types of exercise, we've got weight-bearing exercise, which is anything where your bones and your muscles are working against gravity to keep you upright. These are the things that you're doing on your feet. That's placing stress on your bones. So you've got your running, you're walking, you're hiking, you're dancing, you're gardening, all that kind of stuff. That's all going to be weight-bearing type exercise. If you're doing non-weight bearing exercise, you're not putting that stress on your bones. So that's going to be cycling, paddling in a canoe or a kayak, swimming or water therapy. You don't have that force of gravity that we need helping place that stress on the bones. So, if it's not saying you should never swim. If you enjoy swimming and it makes you happy and it reduces your stress, it's not saying don't ever do that. It's just saying don't do that as your only exercise and count that and say, okay, I'm good to go. I'm doing everything for my bones, because that's not going to be enough. Same thing with if we're running 7 miles every day or 8 miles every day, or we're doing those marathon activities, we need to do additional exercise in there. We need to be lifting, doing some resistance training, and you need to vary the impact that you have. If you're running in the same direction all the time, one foot in front of the other, we need to switch that up, because the bones are going to respond to being surprised.
Yep. It's interesting. The biggest things I've been pushing lately is I think we all know to cross train our exercise. Doesn't mean everybody does it. I've kind of now realized there's a yoga body, just like there's the gym body and there's the runner body, there's a yoga body. And I'm like, I go to each of the different things and look at them. We got to cross train our exercise. We also have to cross train our diet. Both 100%. Of these, both are important. Both are key critical. So when someone comes to you, and I know you've got a master class, because there's so much more we could get into, but like a basic plan, I would assume, is probably diet, supplement, exercise, stress. I'm like kind of going, there's a lot to this.
Yeah, so if somebody, a lot of times when people come to us, they usually have like a supplement in hand, or they have a device in hand, like, hey, I got this vibration plate, or hey, I got this new supplement. That's great, but we're in the tactics. We need to zoom out and focus on the strategy. So when we zoom out and focus on the strategy, we're looking at a couple different buckets. We're looking at figuring out root cause issues. Are you still actively losing bone, and what's contributing to that loss? And then how do we address it? The nourishing your body and making sure you're getting the right nutrients in the right amounts, that you're actually absorbing those nutrients. Super important, because a lot of times, even if someone is eating healthy, you might not be getting the nutrients you need to support stronger, healthier bones, because it happens on 3 layers. First layer, are you taking in the right nutrients in the right amounts? Second layer, are you actually absorbing those nutrients? Third layer, are those nutrients making it to the cell level? A lot of times, even if somebody's eating healthy, those 3 things don't line up. So that's what we focus on in that middle portion. And the last portion is build. You got to build strength of body, mind, and bone in a way that prevents fracture and injury, not just now, but in the future too. So you focus on your stress reduction, sleep improvement, getting the right exercise plan in place, and then also optimizing your hormones and things like that. So,
well, the good news is, like, what works for building better bones has a whole lot of other side benefits as well, as opposed to the medication that has so many bad side effects. It's so. All right, awesome. And now I know you're going to give everyone a masterclass and some amazing recipes. So we are going to put all of that at jjvirgin.com/bone coach, since you are the bone coach. And you want to just let everybody know what they're going to be getting?
Absolutely. So I'm going to give free access to our Stronger Bones Masterclass for JJ's community. This is going to be an awesome, it's a 50-minute overview. It's a masterclass. It's going to walk you through step by step the process that you need to take to get started. So if you're in a position where maybe you haven't had a DEXA scan yet, or maybe you just been diagnosed, or you just want to learn more about it, watch the masterclass, sign up for it, find it in the show notes, find it on, the website that JJ just mentioned, sign up for it, and just get the information right now, because we don't want to avoid getting the information because we don't want to know how to address it. I will tell you that, usually the people that come to us that are later in life, that have maybe already had multiple fractures and things like that, the thing I hear more than anything is, I wish I would have done something 5 or 10 years ago, or I wish I would have met you 20 years ago. Like, I hear that all the time. Let's be on the side of prevention and not reaction.
Yes.
So go watch the masterclass.
This is definitely one that you don't want to be reactive with. Holy smokes. So, and again, everything that you're talking about doing is going to benefit everything else as well. So Absolutely. It's a win-win. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I so appreciate your time today. And I'm going to remind everybody it's jjvirgin.com/bone coach to grab the masterclass and the recipes. Thank you.
Awesome.
All right, so a lot of information in that podcast. Holy smokes, you're definitely going to want, because I feel like we just touched the tip of the iceberg too, that there's so much more information that he has to share. So again, you can get the free masterclass and his recipe guidebook at jjvirgin.com/bone coach. And I will see you in the next session. By the way, if you have not subscribed yet, come on, subscribe to jj.com so you never miss a juicy episode. See you next time.